down from the Valkyrie ships like fire from an angry god. Cities that had taken years to build were reduced to ash in minutes. Forests burned and rivers boiled, and the sky itself seemed to catch fire on the surface. A young man named Daniel Grant was running through the chaos trying to reach the emergency communication center. He was 26 years old, and he had come to New Haven to work as a communications officer because he wanted to help build something new. Now he was watching everything burn around him. A piece of falling debris struck him in the side, and he felt hot blood soaking through his shirt, but he kept moving. Had to reach the beacon, and he had to tell someone what was happening here. The building was half collapsed when he finally got inside, but the emergency transmitter was still working. Daniel pulled himself into the chair, and his hands were shaking as he activated the system. "This is New Haven Colony calling any human vessel," he said, and his voice was steady even though he was terrified. "We are under attack by an unknown alien fleet, and they gave us no warning and made no demands. They just started killing you." Uploaded all the sensor data and all the recordings of the attack and the names of every single person who lived on New Haven. 80,000 names. "Tell them what happened here," Daniel said into the microphone. "Tell them that we died reaching for the stars." The transmission ended and the beacon kept broadcasting for 6 more hours before the Valkyrie finally found it and destroyed it. Admiral Cathfara looked at the blackened surface of the planet and felt satisfied with his work now. Buildings remained standing, and no life signs appeared on his sensors. The human colony had been completely erased. He sent his report to the Dominion Council and recommended that they continue pushing into human territory before the primitives could establish any more settlements. He did not know that the emergency beacon had been received. He did not know that humans had been traveling through space for 200 years, and in that time, they had survived 3 civil wars and 2 conflicts with alien species and a terrible struggle against a rogue artificial intelligence. He did not know that in all of human history, they had never lost a single war. 3 weeks after the attack, the United Earth Assembly met on the moon in emergency session that lasted 9 hours. The recording from New Haven played over and over on the screens, and the names of the dead scrolled continuously on a memorial display. Everyone in the chamber had tears in their eyes, but there was something else there too. There was Anger Fleet Admiral Catherine Cole stood at the podium, and she was 62 years old, with gray hair and a uniform covered in medals from decades of service. She had commanded the defense of Mars during the AI rebellion, and she had buried 2 of her own children who died in previous wars. She thought she knew what grief felt like, but she had never felt rage like this before. "The Valkyrie Dominion has not contacted us," she said to the Assembly. "They have made no demands and issued no declarations and offered no explanation. They simply murdered 80,000 of our people, including children and families, and moved on as if it meant nothing." She paused and let the silence fill the room. "I have spoken with President Martinez, and I have spoken with the military leadership, and I have spoken with our allies. The decision has been made." Admiral Cole looked out at the representatives of humanity, and her eyes were hard as steel. "We are going to war," she said, "not for territory, and not for resources, and not for political power. We are going to war because the Valkyrie have shown us what kind of galaxy we live in, and we refuse to be the kind of species that lets its children be murdered without answer." She activated a holographic display behind her, and a map of the Valkyrie Dominion appeared. 900 star systems, she said. 12,000 years of empire. Countless species destroyed or enslaved. They think they are invincible, and they think we are primitives who will collapse after one defeat. Admiral Cole turned back to face the Assembly, and her voice dropped to something cold and quiet. "They have no idea what they have done. They have no idea what is coming for them." In the weeks that followed, every shipyard in human space began working around the clock. Factories produced weapons and ships and supplies at a pace that had never been seen before. Military academies accelerated their training programs and research facilities focused on developing new technologies. Young people signed up for service in numbers that shocked the recruiters. Daniel Grant had a younger brother named James, who was 23 years old when he heard the news about New Haven. He had always admired his older brother and had planned to join him on the colony someday. Now, Daniel was dead, and James felt something break inside his heart. 3 days after the attack, James walked into a military recruitment office and signed every paper they put in front of him. The recruiter looked at his application and saw the name Granchu. Related to the communications officer from New Haven, she asked. James nodded, and his jaw was tight with grief and determination. He was my brother, he said. The recruiter stamped his papers and handed them back. Welcome to the fleet, she said quietly. We are going to make them pay for what they did all across human space. Similar scenes played out as brothers and sisters and parents and friends of the New Haven victims joined the military, but it was not just the millions of humans who had never known anyone on that distant colony felt the same burning anger. Valkyrie had not just killed 80,000 people. They had united all of humanity in a single purpose, and that purpose was war. It took humanity 18 months to prepare for war, and during that time, the Valkyrie Dominion forgot all about the small colony they had. Destroyed in 12,000 years, they had wiped out hundreds of primitive species, and the humans were just one more name on a long list. They expected the survivors to send desperate pleas for mercy or to retreat into their own space and hide. They never imagined that the humans were building the largest fleet in their history. Admiral Catherine Cole stood in the observation deck of a massive shipyard above the planet Neptune and watched the final warships being completed. 100 vessels hung in the darkness of space, and each one was packed with new weapons and new technologies that the Valkyrie had never seen. Captain Nathan Price joined her at the viewport, and he was only 34 years old, but he had proven himself in previous conflicts, and Cole had personally chosen him to lead the vanguard of the fleet. The stealth systems are ready. Across all ships, he reported, our new drive technology makes us invisible to sensors at any range beyond 2 light minutes. The Valkyrie will not see us coming until we are already on top of them. Cole nodded slowly and kept her eyes on the ships outside. What about the weapons, she asked. Nathan smiled slightly. The kinetic accelerators are installed on every capital ship, and they can fire projectiles at 8% of light speed. Nothing the Valkyrie have can stop them. Dr. Patricia Reyes says the quantum torpedoes will be ready before we reach enemy space, and the crews, every single person in this fleet, has watched the New Haven recording, Nathan said, and his voice became serious. They know exactly why we are here, and they are ready to do whatever it takes. Cole turned to face him, and her expression was stern. Need you to understand something, Captain. This is not a war of revenge, and we are not going to become monsters like them. When we defeat the Valkyrie, we will offer them terms. They will be harsh terms, but we will give them a chance to surrender. Nathan considered this for a moment. And if they refuse to surrender, then we continue fighting until they accept, or until there are no more of them to refuse. But we will give them the choice. That is what makes us different from them. 1 month later, the Retribution fleet crossed into Valkyrie space, and they moved like ghosts through the darkness between stars. Their first encounter was with a patrol of 8 Valkyrie ships guarding a border system. The patrol commander was a veteran named Tefkai, and he had served the Dominion for 40 years without ever seeing real combat. His sensors detected something strange in the emptiness ahead. There was a slight gravitational disturbance that suggested something very large was moving toward them. Before he could investigate further, his ship shook violently and alarms screamed throughout the bridge. One as cruisers was breaking apart in the distance, and it had been struck by something moving so fast that his sensors could not track it. All ships take evasive action. Tefkai shouted, we are under attack by unknown weapons. Those were his last words. A kinetic projectile traveling at 8% of light speed, struck his vessel and passed straight through it. The ship did not explode, it simply stopped being a ship. The entire battle lasted 47 seconds, and every Valkyrie vessel was destroyed. No distress signals were sent, and no warnings reached the Dominion. The Retribution fleet continued its advance without slowing down. Over the next 6 weeks, 14 more Valkyrie patrols vanished without a trace. Monitoring stations went silent. Supply convoys disappeared. Strange sensor readings appear along the border with human space and then vanished before anyone could investigate. The Dominion High Command began to receive worried reports from their outer territories, and finally they recalled Admiral Kethvora to the capital for consultation. He stood before the Dominion Council in their great chamber and tried to make them understand the danger they faced. Something is very wrong, he told them. The humans should have collapsed after we destroyed their colony. Every primitive species does the same thing. They lose one settlement and they retreat, and they beg for mercy. These humans have done none of that. The council elder was a massive Valkyrie named Vethrok, and he had led the Dominion for 300 years. His mandibles clicked with contempt as he listened to Kethvara speak. You destroyed their colony, he said, dismissive. You eliminated their presence in our space. What more can these primitives possibly do to you? See, do not know, Kethvora admitted. But something is out there in the darkness. Something is hunting our ships and our patrols, and we cannot find it. The council dismissed his concerns with waves of their clawed hands. They had ruled the galaxy for 12,000 years, and they had crushed every threat that ever risen against them. They could not imagine that a species as young as humanity could pose any real danger. They did not understand what humanity truly was. Humans had spent their entire existence as a species fighting for survival. They had fought ice ages and plagues and famines. They had fought countless wars against each other. They had fought their way off their home planet and into the stars. They had faced rogue artificial intelligences and hostile alien species and civil wars that nearly tore their civilization apart, and they had won every single time. War was not something that humans feared. War was something that humans excelled at. Lieutenant Commander Maria Santos was 31 years old, and she commanded a squadron of fast destroyers in the Retribution fleet. Her grandmother had emigrated to Mars from a small town in Mexico, and Maria had grown up listening to stories about the old world. Now she was fighting a new kind of war in a place her grandmother could never have imagined. Her squadron swept through a Valkyrie supply route and destroyed 12 cargo ships in a single hour. The Valkyrie escorts tried to fight back, but they could not hit targets. They could not see. Maria watched on her screen as the last enemy vessel broke apart, and she felt no joy in the destruction. This is not about hatred, she told her crew. This is about making sure they can never do to anyone else what they did to New Haven. We are not murderers, we are soldiers, and we have a job to finish back on Velther Prime. The council elder received another report of lost ships and missing patrols. For the first time in centuries, he felt something that might have been fear. He buried it deep inside himself and refused to acknowledge it. The Valkyrie Dominion was eternal. Nothing could threaten him. Nothing could defeat them. He was wrong. Kethver Station was the largest military base in the outer regions of the Valkyrie Dominion, and it had stood unconquered for 4,000 years. 50,000 Valkyrie soldiers lived and worked there, and 80 warships protected it from any possible attack. No enemy had ever dared to approach it. The humans arrived at dawn. Station Commander Rethkai was asleep in his quarters when the alarms began screaming, and by the time he reached the command center, 3 of his defensive platforms had already been destroyed. He stared at the tactical display with growing horror and demanded a report from his officers. Unknown number of hostile vessels, one of them said with panic in his voice. They appeared out of nowhere, and our sensors are having great difficulty tracking them. How is that possible? Rethkai shouted. No one answered because no one knew. Captain Nathan Price stood on the bridge of his flagship, the USS Defiance, and watched the Velthory defenders scramble to respond to the attack. The human fleet had emerged from stealth only moments before, and now they fell upon the station like wolves descending on sheep. All ships begin attack pattern. Omega Nathan ordered calmly. Priority targets are the defensive platforms and the main reactor complex. I want that station dark within 1 hour. The battle was completely one-sided from the very first moment. The Velthory defenders were trained soldiers, but they were fighting an enemy they did not understand with weapons they had never encountered. Human ships moved in perfect coordination and provided covering fire for each other while exploiting every weakness in the Velthory lines. Lieutenant Commander Maria Santos led her destroyer squadron around the station's flank, and her ships were smaller than the Velthory cruisers, but they were faster and more deadly. Target their engines, she ordered. Disable the ships, but do not destroy them completely. We want prisoners for questioning. The Velthory fought bravely, but courage alone could not overcome superior tactics and technology. Within 40 minutes, their defensive fleet had been reduced to scattered wreckage. Within 90 minutes, the station itself went dark as human precision strikes destroyed its main reactor. Commander Rethkai stood in his ruined command center with emergency lights casting red shadows across the faces of his surviving officers. The tactical displays were dead and communications were down, and he could hear distant explosions as human boarding parties fought their way through the corridors. What do we do now? One of his officers asked with fear in his voice. Rethkai did not answering. 12,000 years of Dominion history, no Velthory commander had ever surrendered to an enemy. The concept was completely foreign to their culture and their training. But as he listened to the sounds of battle growing closer, he began to understand that this war was going to be different from anything his people had ever experienced. Admiral Cole arrived at the captured station 3 days later and walked through the damaged corridors. Human Marines stood guard at every junction, and Velthory prisoners were being escorted to holding areas. Captain Nathan Price met her at the former command center, which had been converted into a temporary headquarters. Shardy 2,000 Velthory prisoners, he reported. We lost 6 ships and approximately 800 of our people. The station's computer systems are intact, and our intelligence teams are already processing all the information. What have they found? Cole asked. Everything, Nathan said, with a hint of satisfaction in his voice. Fleet positions and communication codes, and the locations of every major military base in the entire Dominion. Admiral, we now have a complete map of their defensive network. Cole studied the holographic display that had been set up in the center of the room. It showed the Velthory Dominion in all its vastness, with hundreds of key military targets highlighted. Begin transmitting this information to all human vessels, she ordered. The second phase of our campaign begins immediately. We hit them everywhere at once and give them no time to regroup or adapt. We do not give them a moment of rest. What about the prisoners? Nathan asked. Cole turned to watch a group of Velthory being led past the command center. They were tall insectoid beings with armor-like skin and compound eyes that reflected the emergency lights. They looked confused and afraid. They had never experienced defeat before. Treat them humanely, she said firmly. Give them medical care and adequate food and fair treatment. We are not going to become monsters just because we are fighting monsters. When this war is over, the galaxy will know that humanity wins with strength and discipline, not cruelty. Word of the station's fall reached Velthory Prime 7 days later, and the Dominion Council met in emergency session. For the first time in thousands of years, there was real fear in that ancient chamber. This is impossible, Vethrock declared loudly. One primitive species cannot threaten an empire of 900 worlds. Admiral Kethvora stood before the council, and his posture was rigid with frustration. The evidence says otherwise, he replied. The humans have destroyed or captured 37 of our military installations in the past 2 weeks alone. Their fleet appears and disappears at will, and our defensive systems cannot track them. Our weapons cannot stop them. They are not primitives. They are predators, and we made the terrible mistake of making them angry. What do you suggest we do? Vethrak demanded. Thivor hesitated before speaking. Suggest we try to communicate with them and offer them terms for peace. Perhaps they can be reasoned with before they destroy everything we have. Built the council elders' mandibles clicked with contempt. Velthari Dominion does not negotiate with lesser species, he said proudly. We have ruled this region of space for 12,000 years, and we will not bow to creatures who were building mud huts when our ancestors were conquering star systems. Then we will lose this war. Kethvara said simply. Absolute silence filled the chamber. No one had ever spoken such words before the Dominion Council, but deep in their hearts, every member of that council knew that Kethvara was speaking the truth. The humans were coming for them, and there was nothing they could do to stop it. The human campaign against the Velthari Dominion continued for 9 long months, and system by system, the ancient empire was torn apart. Humans did not try to conquer territory or steal resources. They simply destroyed every military target they could find. Every fleet that rose to challenge them was defeated, and every fortress that stood against them was taken admiral. Cole directed the entire campaign from her flagship, the USS Abraham Lincoln. She slept only 4 hours each night, and sometimes not even that. Every decision and every tactical choice passed through her hands. She had promised the Assembly that humanity would win this war, and she intended to keep that promise, no matter what it cost her. But she also remembered her other promise. Every Velthari installation that surrendered was treated according to human military law. Prisoners were given food and shelter and medical care. Civilians unconquered worlds were protected from harm. When human forces occupied Velthari territory, they maintained order and repaired damaged infrastructure and prevented anyone from taking revenge. Lieutenant James Grant had completed his training and now commanded a Marine company in the occupation forces. He was Daniel Grant's younger brother, and he had joined the military to avenge his family. His unit was assigned to help occupy a Velthari colony world called Kethmer, and he arrived there expecting to feel satisfaction at finally striking back at the enemy. Instead, he felt something completely unexpected. He walked through the streets of the capital city, past Velthari civilians who watched him with fear in their compound eyes. They were tall and alien with armored bodies and clicking mandibles, but something about them seemed familiar. They were just people. Alien people, yes. People whose government had murdered his brother, but the workers and families and children he saw had not made the decision to attack New Haven. They had not given that order. They were simply caught in the same terrible war that had taken Daniel from him. Sir, one of his sergeants asked, what do we do with all these civilians? James looked at the frightened faces surrounding them and thought about his brother's last words. Tell them what happened here. Tell them that we died reaching for the stars. We protect them, James said firmly. We keep order and make sure nobody gets hurt. That is our job now. The sergeant looked surprised but nodded and passed the orders along. Over the following weeks, James found himself talking with some of the Velthari civilians. He learned their language through a translation device and discovered that many of them had never supported the Dominion's wars of extermination. They had simply been too afraid to speak out. One elderly Velthari named Kethros told James about his own son, who had died in a previous war against a species that no longer existed. He had opposed that war, but his opposition had meant nothing. The Dominion did what it wanted, and ordinary people had no voice. I am sorry for what my government did to your people, Kethros said quietly. I did not know about the attack on your colony until after it happened. But I knew what the Dominion was capable of, and I said nothing. I am as guilty as anyone. James considered these words for a long time. I lost my brother at New Haven. He finally replied, I came here wanting revenge. I wanted to make someone pay for what happened to him. but you did not kill my brother. Dominion leadership gave those orders, punishing you would not bring Daniel Bakathros looked at the young human with something like wonder in his eyes. Your people are very strange, he said. You defeat us completely and then you show us mercy. The Dominion would never do such a thing. I know, James said. That is why we are going to win. As the months passed, the Volturi began to understand something that contradicted everything they had been taught about the universe. The humans were not just powerful warriors, they were something stranger and more confusing. They won battles and then helped the survivors. They conquered worlds and then rebuilt them. They had every reason to hate the Volturi with burning fury, and yet they treated prisoners with respect. Some Volturi began to wonder if perhaps their empire had been wrong about everything. Admiral Kethfora still believed he could turn the tide of the war. He gathered every remaining warship in the Dominion, nearly 200 vessels, and planned one final desperate offensive. If he could cut the human supply lines, perhaps he could slow their advance long enough for the Dominion to rebuild its forces. The Battle of the Void took place in empty space between star systems. There were no planets or stations nearby, just two massive fleets facing each other across the endless darkness. Admiral Cole had anticipated this move because she had studied Kethfora carefully and predicted exactly where he would strike. The Retribution fleet was waiting for him. The battle lasted 6 terrible hours. By the end, 173 Volturi ships had been destroyed or disabled. Human losses were 29 vessels. Admiral Kethfora survived the battle, but his flagship was crippled. Its weapons were destroyed, and its engines were dead. He sat in his command chair in the darkness and waited for the humans to come and kill him. Instead, a human shuttle docked with his ruined ship, and a boarding party entered the bridge. They had weapons raised, but they did not fire. A young officer approached him. Admiral Kethfora, the officer said calmly, I am Captain Nathan Price of the United Earth Fleet. You are now a prisoner of war. You will be treated humanely according to our military protocols. You understand? Ketholver stared at the human for a long moment. In 12,000 years, his species had never taken prisoners. They had never shown mercy to a defeated enemy. The concept was so foreign to his mind that he could barely understand it. Why? He asked finally. We destroyed your colony. We murdered your people. Why do you not simply kill me? Nathan Price's expression did not change. Because that would make us like you, he said. And we are not like you. That is why we are winning. The capital world of Velthor Prime was covered in ancient towers and crystalline spires that had been built over thousands of years of unbroken civilization. No enemy had ever reached this sacred place. No invader had ever threatened its people. For 12,000 years, it had stood as the symbol of dominion, power, and permanence. The human fleet arrived on a clear morning, and 200 warships emerged from the darkness to hang in orbit. Like a crown of steel and fire, the Dominion Council looked up at the view screens and saw their defeat written across the sky. Admiral Cole transmitted a message to the surface, and her face appeared on every screen on the planet. People of Velthor Prime, she said in a calm and steady voice, Admiral Catherine Cole of the United Earth Fleet, your military forces have been defeated. Your empire has fallen. You have 1 hour to surrender unconditionally, or we will begin destroying your military installations from orbit. She paused to let her words sink into the minds of every Velthori watching. I want to be clear about something, she continued. We could destroy your entire world. We have the power to do it, and after what you did to New Haven, many would say we have the right, but we are not going to do that. We did not come here for revenge. We came here to make sure that what happened to our people can never happen again. Dominion Council gathered for what would be their final meeting. Vethrock the Elder proposed fighting to the last soldier and dying with honor rather than surrendering to primitives. Several other council members agreed with him, but a younger member named Kethria spoke against them. Look at what we have become, she said with sadness in her voice. For 12,000 years, We have ruled through fear and destruction. We killed anyone who challenged us and absorbed anyone who submitted. And where has it brought us? Our fleets are gone. Our fortresses are in human hands. Our empire is crumbling around us. She pointed at the view screen, where the human fleet waited in silent orbit. These humans have defeated us completely, she said, and yet they offer us a chance to surrender. They could kill every one of us, but they choose not to. Perhaps they understand something about strength that we never learned. The vote was close, but surrender won the Velthory. Dominion had fallen. The peace conference was held on a neutral station in the border region between human and Velthory. Space Admiral Cole represented humanity, while a delegation of defeated Velthory officials represented what remained of their empire. The terms were harsh, as Cole had promised. The Velthory military was to be completely dismantled. All species that had been conquered and enslaved would be freed. War criminals, including those who had ordered the destruction of New Haven, would face trial. The Dominion would pay compensation to the families of the victims, but there was something else that surprised everyone. Humanity offered to help rebuild Velthory society. They proposed technical assistance and trade agreements and cultural exchange programs. The same hands that had crushed the Dominion's military now reached out in what looked like friendship. Admiral Kethvora had been brought to the conference as a prisoner, and he watched the proceedings with complete confusion. I do not understand any of this, he said to Captain Nathan Price, who had been assigned to guard him. We murdered your people. We tried to destroy your species. Why do you help us now instead of punishing us forever? Nathan was quiet for a moment before answering. When I was young, my father told me that you can judge a people not by how they treat their friends, but by how they treat their enemies. We could spend the next 1,000 years making you suffer. For New Haven, we could burn your worlds and enslave your children and make you feel all the pain you made us feel. But that would not bring back the dead. It would only create more suffering. He looked out the viewport at the distant stars. We are going to be living in this galaxy together for a very long time, he said. We can either spend that time destroying each other, or we can try to build something better. My brother died at New Haven. He died reaching for the stars, hoping to find a place where humans could live in peace. If I become a monster in his name, then his death meant nothing. The Treaty of New Haven was signed 3 days later. Admiral Cole spoke directly to the Velthory delegation in her closing remarks. 18 months ago, you destroyed one of our colonies and killed 80,000 innocent people, she said. You thought we would collapse and retreat into our own space. You were completely wrong about us. She paused, and her voice grew softer. We did not come here just to prove that humanity is strong. You already know that. We came here to show you that humanity is more than strong. We are capable of mercy and forgiveness. We are capable of building instead of only destroying. We are capable of making peace with those who have wronged us. The war is over. Now the hard part begins. We have to learn to live together in this galaxy. We have to build trust where there was only hatred. We have to create a future where what happened at New Haven can never happen again. That is the real victory, not the battles we won, but the peace we built together. In the years that followed, the galaxy transformed species that had suffered under Velthory rule emerged into freedom for the first time in millennia. Trade routes connected human space to former Dominion territory. Cultural exchanges brought understanding where there had been only fear, and in the skies above every world, human warships continued their eternal patrols, not as conquerors, not as oppressors, but as guardians and protectors. A reminder that somewhere in the galaxy there was a species that would come for anyone who threatened the innocent, species that remembered its dead and honored them by building a better future. Daniel Grant's name was carved into a memorial on New Haven, where the colony had been rebuilt even larger than before. Every year on the anniversary of the attack, the colonists gathered to remember those who had died and celebrate what had risen from the ashes. Admiral Cole attended the first ceremony after the war and stood before the crowd. They tried to destroy us. she said. They thought they could break humanity with fire and death, but they did not understand what we truly are. We are a species that never surrenders. We are a species that never forgets. It's fallen we are a species that builds a future worthy of their sacrifice. She looked up at the stars with tears in her eyes. That is the legacy of New Haven. That is what our people died for, not revenge, but hope a future where the stars are safe for everyone who reaches for them. The ceremony ended and life continued, and in the darkness between the stars, human warships kept their endless watch, patient and vigilant and always ready. The galaxy had learned an important lesson. If you reach out to humanity in peace, you will find no better friend among all the stars, but if you harm their people, you will face a reckoning that will shake the foundations of your civilization. The stars were shadowed by human warships, and now those shadows meant protection for everyone. The end.